Ba nghiệp lặng thanh tịnh gợi lòng theo tiếng chuông, nguyện người nghe tỉnh thức vượt thoát nẻo đau buồn. Lắng lòng nghe, lắng lòng nghe tiếng chuông huyền diệu đưa về nhân tâm.
We're trading everything that is most important to animals against something that is almost mind-numbingly inconsequential for humans. And we're saying that the human momentary pleasure outweighs the heretical cruelty and exploitation and killing of animals.
These animals are living in a world that is completely unseen and unprotected by law. When an undercover investigation is released to the public, a lot of people in the industry want to be able to say, well, that's just one bad apple. That's not representative of the entire industry. But what we're finding is that undercover investigation after undercover investigation is routinely uncovering abuses that demonstrate that animal cruelty is standard practice.
People might say things like, I don't want to know, don't tell me about this. And I actually have had people cover their ears because they don't want to hear it. Like people say, don't tell me about chicken. I'm not eating red meat, but I'm still eating chicken, so I don't want to meet the chickens. Of course I take them down there right away. Then they have to hold the chicken.
Well, our true nature is Buddha nature, which is not a sectarian statement. It means that we all have the same fundamental essence, and that fundamental essence is enlightened. That fundamental essence is loving, it's kind, it's compassionate, it rejoices in the happiness of others. It acts for the good of all.
The highest calling of all religion is nonviolence. And I think that's true of secular humanism as well. When you talk with people who are either pro-spirituality but anti-organized religion, or even the people who are atheists and anti-religion, pretty much we can all agree that if we have two choices in front of us, and one of them is add to the level of mercy in the world, and one of them is add to the level of misery in the world, it's pretty basic to ethics and basic to religion that we go with mercy. Compassion or cruelty, we go with compassion. Like that's what it means to be an ethical human being in the world, regardless of one's faith background.
And the subtext of every meal also is that certain beings are superior and others are inferior. So there's this basic sense of entitlement, a basic sense of might makes right. Those who are strong can use and abuse and exploit those who are less powerful. And so when we see injustice like racism and sexism and ableism and heterosexism and human trafficking and classism and all the ways that we human beings have found to exploit each other, to oppress each other, to use each other, abuse each other, underneath that is this constant and ongoing violence towards animals for food and other products, where we abuse them in the same way and have this same attitude of superiority, the same attitude of disconnectedness, the same attitude of reductionism, of reducing them to commodities that don't have feelings. We don't sympathize with them. We learn essentially to harden our hearts.
If you look at any problem in the world right now, anyone, nationalism, racism, sexism, any ism in the world is basically the product of separation and supremacy. And perhaps the most significant one, and I know that people don't want to hear about it, but the most significant one is speciesism. We think that we as humans are entitled to not only rule the planet, but to exploit it. Look at the result of that. What is the result of that dominionist ideology? Well, we are on the verge of ecological collapse.
Animal agriculture is a significant contributor to global climate change. So anywhere from between 14.5% to perhaps 18%, maybe even slightly more of global greenhouse gas emissions caused by human activity are directly attributable to the livestock sector. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization came out with this very seminal report called Livestock's Long Shadow in 2006. And that really set a very strong research agenda basis. And their conclusion was, the livestock sector is closely linked to the most pressing environmental problems throughout the world, from water pollution to deforestation to climate change. And it needs to be addressed in that framework. It can't be a side issue, it needs to be a central aspect of public policy.
It was in 1972, I had moved to Washington, and I was working for an environmental consulting company. So they sent me to a Midwestern slaughterhouse to do an inventory of their wastewater. So I was walking around and taking notes, and I turned a corner, and all of a sudden I saw these piles of body parts, heads and skulls and legs and discarded bodies. And I just recoiled in horror, as most people would. And the images of the piles of body parts that I saw in Auschwitz came flooding into my head. The piles of hair and glasses and shoes and suitcases. And the similarity just struck me. And at first I tried to dismiss it, saying, oh, they're only animals. But it wouldn't go away. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized the similarities, the concept of tattooing or branding numbers or IDs on the victims' bodies, the use of cattle cars to transport Jews to the death camps, the crowding in the wood crates of the victims, and the deception of what goes on behind the death camp walls or the slaughterhouse walls. So I went through a lot of internal turmoil because it was a little bit like having a truth that I'm the only one that's aware of, and nobody else is aware of, which makes me at least strange and possibly crazy. I was having a lot of self-doubt. And then I came across the quote by Isaac Bashevis Singer, which said in effect that to the animals, all men are Nazis, and life is an eternal Treblinka.
I'm fighting for marginalized groups, period. Finally seeing what was happening to animals and seeing them as maybe the most vulnerable community. When I am fighting for them, I'm fighting the injustice that is happening to them.
Struggle for animal rights is not really about the animals. It's really about us. It's about how we choose to treat the most defenseless, most oppressed living beings on earth.
How do I feel about the future and my hopes for the future? Well, if I'm honest, I try not to. Because as an activist, I have a very immediate goal, and it's to do what I can do today. My life is so short, and ultimately, the only meaning my life can have is a change that I bring here, is how I touch others, how I touch the earth that I walk on.
When you live this lifestyle, you just learn how at peace you can be with the world.
Dietary shifts are where it's at. That's the biggest and most significant, impactful change that humans as individuals need to make to help animals and the planet and ultimately ourselves.
And so I am very concerned about the future. I'm afraid that we're not going to learn our lessons quick enough. Even currently, if we all just switched up our systems and became vegan, that would be great. It would do a lot, but we're running out of time.
I don't think we have a future if our future is not vegan.
Go vegan.
When we have the compassion a lot in our hearts, we can embrace everything.